First one is a question for you, Jeff, and it's from Bruce in Manhasset, New York. What significant difference in the command structure of the Confederacy would you foresee on a going forward basis had Johnston not been killed?
Well, I talk about this a lot to audiences. There's two things. First of all, at the time of Johnston's death, approximately 3:30 in the afternoon on April 6th, you can make the argument that the Confederacy was carrying the day. They were winning the battle at that point. Now, whether they would have won the battle is pure speculation, and we'll never know that at the time Johnston went down. That's one point. Had they won the battle, as I mentioned earlier, Ulysses Grant's career would have ended on the spot, and we never would have heard of Ulysses Grant after that. The second part of it, though, I think is more important. In the hierarchy of the Confederacy, Johnston outranked Robert E. Lee. And it's highly possible that when things sort of went to pieces on the Virginia Peninsula, when Joe Johnston went down with the wound, when Jefferson Davis appointed Robert E. Lee to command of the Army of Northern Virginia, it's highly possible, because Davis loved Albert Sidney Johnston, they were enormous friends, it's highly possible that Davis would have, instead of promoting Lee, Davis would have called Johnston to come east and take over command at what a lot of people considered was the more important, particularly the Confederate Congress considered was the more important area, which was Richmond, possibly invading, defeating Washington, which would have ended the war, and protecting the whole eastern seaboard. It's very possible Johnston would have come east. We never would have heard of Robert E. Lee. Lee was Davis's paper pusher, if you will, in Richmond. I mean, he worked in Davis's offices, which was for Lee a miserable assignment, but he was good at it, as he was good at most anything he did. And it's quite likely that Davis would have kept him right there in the office and brought Johnston over. So I think that, in that way, literally it changed history by Johnston going down.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Bruce. And I have a couple of questions for you, Tim. But the first one is, as you mentioned, you're a small town boy from Mississippi. And Tim Smith was recently in the United Kingdom presenting at the American Civil War Roundtable of the UK. How did you enjoy that experience? This wasn't signed, but I would like to hope that it's from one of our friends in the UK who recently met Tim.
It was a wonderful experience. I'd, of course, never been to Europe or anything, but I'd been to Latin America, but never to Europe. Extremely long flights. Which that was one thing, but over there, they're wonderful people. It was amazing. Unfortunately, because of our small kids and logistical issues, we weren't able to go and stay, for a couple of weeks or anything. We had to get back. Of course, teaching every week makes a difference as well. I had to get back to my real job, but it was a great experience. Those folks over there, they are absolutely, they're very knowledgeable about the American Civil War and passionate about it, and it was a very good group to speak to, and they treated us well and had a wonderful time over there.
Well, then if they are watching, we should talk about whether virtual book signing can export live book signings to the UK, and we'll get them historians to talk to them over the internet. Unfortunately, that means that they don't bring you over. You don't get to visit. And then a question about Corinth. This is from Chris. Thank you, Chris. Tim, do you think Beauregard left Corinth too late? Should he have left after the attack of May 22nd failed to come off? Thank you, Chris. Did not intend to spend a lot of time on the siege, but I'm a geek for the siege. I love that. They say nothing happened. All this stuff happened. Yeah. What about Tim's?
Well, the planning for the evacuation begins right after the fiasco that is the May 22nd operation, and it takes a while to get that going, to get everything loaded and get everything evacuated out of Corinth. Of course, the planning starts very early after that, so I think Beauregard's already thinking about that. He even starts talking about evacuation as early as the operations around Farmington, May 9th. Some of that may be more politically motivated to start covering himself in case he has to later evacuate, just kind of mention it and get it in their minds a little bit. But it does take a little while to get this going. He originally intends to evacuate a day early. And then it's just such a mammoth job of loading everything and evacuating everything. You have to delay it, of course. So I don't know that he loses anything by staying as late as he did, and I don't know that he evacuates too late. The marvel is that he evacuates anything and gets out pretty much lock, stock, and barrel. They do lose some things, but they get a lot of it out. What interests me, though, is that Beauregard would leave at all without, of course, he makes a couple of attempts in May the 9th at Farmington, and then the later operation that he referenced. Contrast that with Beauregard's rhetoric of, if we lose here, we lose the Mississippi Valley and probably our cause. Talking about other things, we can't lose Corinth because we're going to lose the war if we lose this. And then he withdraws, It makes me wonder if there was something else going on that we don't know about that didn't get in the records, But obviously he does try to bring on a battle 2 different times, and it doesn't work. But I wonder why he didn't try to bring on a battle again. Of course, he's vastly outnumbered. Halleck by that time has his siege guns in place and ready to bombard the place, and there's a lot going on there. I can't fault Beauregard for evacuating, though. I look at him in comparison, for instance, with John Pemberton or Pillow and Floyd and Buckner at Fort Donelson or some of those, where they know a place is untenable and they can't hold the place, but they lose the army losing the place. And Beauregard is smart enough to know that we don't need to lose the army while we're losing the place. We're going to lose it anyway. We're going to lose Corinth, so let's don't lose the army while we're doing that. So let's evacuate and get out.
That kind of behavior that Beauregard is doing, with entering into an enterprise with a whole lot of enthusiasm and confidence, and then on the cusp of it backing off, I can see Jeff grinning about it, because that's a major part of this character of Beauregard that you write. How did you see that, or how did that apply to Shiloh?
The exact same thing happens just in the preliminary couple of days prior to Shiloh. I mean, the advance out of Corinth originally by Johnston's army in early April is a mess. I mean, the roads are a mess. The 4 corps commanded by Hardee, Polk, Bragg, and Breckinridge are very. It's supposed to be it's all planned out very neatly that they're going to take these roads and they're going to rendezvous at this place and they're going to attack the Grant's army at Pittsburgh Landing in an arc. I mean, they're going to basically assault the entire army. And midway through this entire process, people are on the move. Of course, the cannons are bogged down in mud. The supply trains are a mess. Units are blocking each other's way at the intersections. People are mad at each other. Some people are lost. Some people just camp for the night, pull over side of the road and order their people to stop without telling anybody they're doing this. I mean, it's a giant fiasco. In the midst of that process, first of all, Beauregard, Colonel Thomas Jordan, who's really I like to say the power behind the Beauregard's throne. This is the man who is the logistical planner for much of the attack at Shiloh. Jordan changes the plan of attack. Instead of doing an arc and hitting the entire Union position, he lines the corps up one behind the other, and we're going to go in one at a time. And Johnston, this is one of the knocks against Albert Sidney Johnston. Johnston could have vetoed that. He doesn't. He goes along with it. Nobody really understands why. That's one of the great unanswered questions. Why does he go along with that change of plan at the 11th hour? But the other part is Beauregard, right at the end, as they're getting into position, Hardee's troops are already basically in position to start the attack, and Beauregard decides and advises all of them, including Johnston, why don't we go back to Corinth? This isn't going to work. Surely the Union Army is prepared for us. Surely the surprise has been blown. We're making too much noise. He rants about that. The fact that the Confederate troops who are supposed to be stealthy, sneaking up, they're firing their muskets, they're playing their banjos. I mean, it's ridiculous. And Beauregard, and again, pro-Beauregard people would probably argue with this, but what I say is essentially he loses his nerve. He says, no, this isn't going to work. Let's go back to Corinth. The entire army is out there. and he wants to turn around and march back. And Johnston then vetoes it and says, no, I would fight, and I love the quote, I would fight them if they were 1,000,000. And that's the quote from Johnston. All of this is I put in the book. And again, this is Johnston's take, and obviously there are some pro-Beauregard people who might disagree with that, but it's the take that I put into the book.
Now, I'm going to, again, for you, Jeff, this has been something that I'm thinking of, and it's going to change our topic a little bit, maybe over to genre. Your book is not just about the history of the Battle of Shiloh. Your book also exists within the family of literature, novels about the Battle of Shiloh. So you're also in there with Shelby Foote on Shiloh. You're also in there with Will Henry's journey to Shiloh. Did previous works of fiction, poetry, songs, stuff like that, did any of these influence you while you were writing?
Absolutely not. One of the things, this is a very important point, I'm asked this a lot, if I've read, whether it's Newt Gingrich or Winston Groom or whoever it might be, am I reading their stuff? Absolutely not. I am terrified of being accused of plagiarism. And I never read, I write fiction, so this may sound a little weird. I never read fiction. I never read anyone else's novel. If I pick up a single line of dialogue or a characterization that sticks in my head and by accident comes out later on in my own work, that's the pure definition of plagiarism. I could lose my career. So no, the answer to your question is I don't read anyone else's work of fiction. All my research goes back to the original source material, diaries, memoirs, collections of letters. I have, for example, Albert Sidney Johnston's son. Now, obviously that may be a little bit of a biased account of Johnston's life, but it contains innumerable letters and correspondence with a huge number of subordinates, people who fought with Johnston, who knew him, friends of his. You get their input as well. All of that contributes to sort of forming the character. Yes, what I write is fiction by definition because there's dialogue, because you're in the heads of the characters, you're seeing the action from their points of view, but the research takes me there, and I try to paint a portrait as accurate as I possibly can to who the character really was. If I don't do that, the book just doesn't work.
All right. And then Tim, going to go back to the town. What happened to the town after Beauregard left?
Well, the Federals come in and they make it a major garrison post in the Union line from. Basically, the Union line is situated from Memphis to Corinth along the Memphis and Charleston Railroad, and that is then the jumping off point. That's the staging area for the movements down to Vicksburg. What has happened, the intention, of course, early in the war is to open the Mississippi Valley. That's the federal view. When they get to the first obstacle, Columbus, Kentucky, it is impregnable almost, the Gibraltar of the South. And they decide we can't go through it. It'll cost way too many men and boats and so on to go through it. So what we're going to do, we're going to sidestep and turn that position. We're going to go down the Tennessee Valley rather than the Mississippi Valley. So they go down as far as they can on that, take Corinth, and then they sidestep back over to the Mississippi Valley and continue on down, of course, and eventually take Vicksburg. Farragut and Banks and some of those are coming up. Butler and later Banks are coming up from the south as well, taking New Orleans in April. So what you see in this snapshot in time, in May 1862, really till about October, November, you see the Corinth area is a staging area. They're garrisoning their troops. They're getting ready for the continual movement on farther down the Mississippi Valley. And as a result, the federal forces will hold Corinth. They will very much fortify it. They will make it much more defensible than it even was in the October battle. They'll build huge forts down there. And then, of course, they will move on down to Vicksburg. Now, it's interesting, once Corinth no longer is important in their strategic mindset, they'll evacuate the place. In January 1864, they will leave, and the Confederates then will come back and reoccupy Corinth. The Federals return a couple of times later in the war just to kind of let the folks in that area know that, hey, we still can come in here and retake this place if we want to, small bodies. But by then, of course, the war has shifted farther east. The Sherman's campaign to Atlanta and the March to the Sea and all of that. So Corinth by that time is kind of the backwater of the war, and doesn't serve as much of a purpose as it did earlier in the war.
I think that's a surprise to some people when they learn about Corinth, is they think when it was taken, it remained taken.
Yeah.
It did revert to Confederate government when nobody wanted it
Right.
anymore.
That's why you don't have a book entitled Corinth 1864.